guys, I thought I'd just wear my beads today because these were actually bought in Tanzania
Okay.
on a YouTube video. And it's really to encourage you guys who are watching to learn about African fashion business from the viewpoint of those who are doing it. There's so much thoughts and ideas around it, but what are people saying? And I hate I'm probably been guilty of doing it myself, the kind of them and us thing. You know, oh, those out there in Africa and us over here. It's like, why we do that? Okay, people are people, but yeah, people are people. So let's just have uber respect for those who are doing amazing things. Full stop. And for me, if they're in Africa, it's even better because I love the continent. So I will boost them up because yeah,
Thank you.
my people.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me tonight and have this opportunity to share my almost over 10-year journey.
Yeah.
We started in 2008. I had just returned from diaspora. I was living in Europe and I was living in the heart of Switzerland in Zurich. Prior to that, I used to work for a private bank, and I was involved in a team where they would invest in luxury goods. So I had the access to meet designers in those days, like 10 years ago, like Christopher Bailey. At that time, he was designing for Burberry.
Yeah.
And, Domenico De Sole at that time, he was, they were managing, they were designing Tod's. So, between Zurich and Milan, that used to be like, we used to have these meetings which would be prepared by banks. And I had the possibility of literally going behind the scenes and seeing what the designer was up to whenever they gave us their SWOT analysis about the business. So ever since I had this access, I always had a dream to have my own business and run it. And at some times I'd be surprised that I would be laying fabrics that they're very familiar to me. And that kept on inspiring me. So when I returned back to Tanzania, I settled in Zanzibar. It's not only beautiful, but it's also made sense for the company because it was a tourist destination.
In Stone Town, right? That's where the shop is, still in Stone Town. Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So no, you had a question?
Yeah, it's literally, you started because of what you were seeing out there and you saw opportunity. So coming back to Tanzania, as let's just put it in one,
yes,
you were inspired to start up your own thing.
Yes. I had such a drive that if I look back now, I don't know if I'd ever take such risks because I was much younger then. And I just could not care. I was young. I was like, just had my first daughter. And in spite of the responsibility, she gave me so much energy to just do it. Because, she was the best, thing that had happened. And I thought that, why can't everything be the best around me, work, job-wise, etc. So that's when I left Europe. I left Switzerland. And then I returned to Tanzania. And from day one, I, obviously having a business administration background, I tried and to start right, avoiding, expensive mistakes, which there were some in between, but I managed to, I think with my educational background and what I'd achieved in my life, in my professional life as a diaspora, that helped a lot. So when I launched the brand in 2008, there were so many things that I had started with, but I had started them right.
So can you share a little bit about that? Because, okay, so with African Fashion Guide, those who know and those who come and work with me, there's two main things. It's telling the stories. It's raising awareness is what I wanted to do from the beginning. There wasn't enough conversation about fashion made in Africa. There was about the designers. There were some shows happening at the time, like just over 10 years ago, but there wasn't enough about the supply chain. So those who come work with me, what they know is that they're going to get some training, some teaching about that, some coaching, and get equipped to set up that business. And I always also give them suppliers so they can have their supply chain worked out. But like yourself, you didn't have that. You or how did you get started to get your manufacturing? Because you was doing that all locally, or was you doing some back in Zurich, or in Italy, or even in London, or where? What? How did you get that set up? If you don't mind sharing, what you can share.
Yes, I already had, just through my passion, whenever I'd come, to Tanzania on vacation, I'd keep the ladies busy, just, producing some pieces just for myself privately.
Yeah.
And these were women that would just be like, on the streets. I had an idea. I knew that there were factories around East Africa, but that wasn't my mission. My mission was from day one to work with people who really, when I say in need, people that I can support, we can support each other. So it was the lady that doesn't really buy in bulk, but needs to make ends meet, and she is so hardworking. And those are the women that I took off the street, between selling bread and weaving some beads. And those are the women that I collected, and those were the indigenous women I started with, which were the Maasai.
Wow.
And there it wasn't as straightforward, because I came across, I had a crash, not a crush, a crash. And there was a clash, there was a cultural clash.
Okay.
As much as I spoke Swahili, there was a clash in culture. There were, just within the Maasai culture, there was so much that I had to go through until I had a product finished. An example was when I found myself having to deliver an order to Switzerland, and when they had said it was ready, there were 11 pairs, but each pair had a different type of color.
Okay.
And I was absolutely furious because I was nervous. There was no, this is handwork that takes forever. And I explained to the ladies, and I was absolutely upset. I couldn't help myself. And the elder lady stood up and said, "You can't speak to us that way, because this is our culture. If we decide to mix white on the left side, it's because it means something to us." So, as I said, finding this whole way of producing and being on time was not as straightforward as it is today. It was a very tough journey, and I came across through cultural challenges. As much as we were all coming from the same country, but there was like, this is in our culture, it's okay, you don't tell us what to produce. It took 3 weeks for them to change those shoes, by the way. So yes, so there were a lot of guardian angels as well, because I had to explain it and be very transparent to my producers that I was facing a cultural issue, and they still took the order. They had to understand. So it somehow, in those days, it still worked. I think it would be very hard today to explain that to any buyer in New York or Paris, that they'll just think like, just cancel the order.
Yeah.
But I think with my energy and positivity I had on these orders with these women who couldn't read and write, and until today some of them can't read and write, somehow it worked. So it wasn't straightforward, to keep the long story short.
Wow, I mean, these are a lot of things I didn't really know, and it does highlight that. I mean, you chose to work with an artisanal group, so to speak,
Yes.
for lack of better terms. There's one thing, those who know me, they do listen to, who watch my videos, who watch my YouTube, or things I say, is because I've come in from the perspective of large scale manufacturing, medium scale, like Puma, C&A, these large like retailers. And so I understand the fashion industry from that perspective, as well as being a designer brand, because I set up my own label back in the day. So I understand the different levels. But when I work with people, I'm like, I call it the 1-1 tailor, that you can't scale your business working with a 1-1 tailor. the kind that people meet, you know, the kind who go on their holidays, first time to whatever African country, you meet someone who's making clothes by the roadside and they make something, and then you go and you want to produce further with them. And the things you're saying about consistency and quality is the main reason. I did do a proper video. I've done a very short one, but not a proper video on this. I'm going to do that. And I do encourage working with artisans. You know, if you're doing your beads or you're doing some embroidery or some handwork, I love the work by hand, weaving or whatever it may be. Yes. But to scale the production, these are kind of things that you are saying. Did you end up, I mean, did you just continue to work with them in a mini workshop factory setting, or did you move on to an established production house? How did you kind of transition to the next step?
First of all, they forced me to transition. I had no choice, because I then decided with these Maasai women, I was working with them on the mainland. That was before I moved the brand to Zanzibar in 2008. And they refused to move with me because they said they are not, they don't eat fish, so they can't move. So suddenly I had anticipated that they'll move with me. They were happy, they were earning money.
Say that again, they don't eat fish, so they can't move. Just explain the...
It's because
those who don't know.
Exactly. They kept on laughing and saying, how are we going to live in Zanzibar? That will mean we have to eat fish. Exactly. And we have to eat fish, and we don't eat fish. We love, you know, drinking like blood, you know, like raw, and we like to have meat, and, you know, we are nomads. We move in groups. Can you absorb us? And I was like, how many are you? They're like 40. I was like, well, I think 10, you know. And I was really ready to take all of them, you know, and that the wives come with the, you know, husbands, etc. But then they refused. So in the middle of my production, I realized that, you know, I had to immediately, you know, like finish what I had to finish. I had to change my season suddenly. Rather than using beads, I had to incorporate fabric. But at the same time, I had to also get some women who were not Maasai, women who have migrated from the village to the city, to learn their skill. So I moved to Zanzibar. I had to immediately change my collection. And then while I changed my collection, there were women that, like 10 women that I had, you know, asked to stay with the Maasai women and learn their skill. And once I see their work is getting, you know, just as good as theirs, then they can move to Zanzibar. And that's what happened. And in Zanzibar, that's when I opened my workshop. Like, because I realized that it's mission impossible with the ladies that I was working with on the mainland. So I opened a workshop that was already like moving into, you know, a bigger scale, and, you know, where I can control quality and quantity. And then ever since I opened the workshop, we've been working this way until to date.
Wow. So actually, I think when I came, you was telling me a bit more, because it's been so long. I feel like I need a trip back. I mean, who wouldn't want a trip back to Zanzibar? Like, please, anytime, invite me now. I'll come over in a minute, if the budget will allow. But that was amazing. But are you telling me that the people that you worked with when you started this business are the same people, or at least some of the same people?
96% are the same.
Wow.
They came young, and now they're, you know, like they, you know, have matured. I lost 2 through HIV/AIDS. So yeah, that was really bad luck. They came while they were ill, but then, you know, they it was like 10 years ago. I mean, like maybe 8 years ago when it happened. They didn't stay very long. But yeah, it's still the same people. And what we do is now, in order for us to manage international orders, is whenever the orders become very overwhelming, too big for us to manage, then we outsource.
Locally outsource, or
locally
outsource?
I outsource locally in Tanzania. That's always my first place I would think of. And then after that, if that's not possible, then I go to East Africa, around Kenya. Once I had produced a dress when everyone around East Africa was busy, so I had that done in Ghana. So yeah.
Okay. So just to explain, you make women's, still just women's wear?
Yes, so far we make women's wear, handbags, jewelry, shoes. We're very busy.
Handbags are great. Wow.
Home, homeware. I started home. It hasn't like developed so well, but I can show you a piece. And our focus has always been commercial, right? Whenever I go to shows, I always, 80% whenever I present the brand, it's commercial pieces. Obviously, we can always go, beyond that, but we realize that that doesn't work for us. Uh, you know, Business doesn't come back fast whenever we show pieces that are artistic.
Yeah.
But whenever we present commercial pieces, there's always like quite a positive feedback. And ever since then, we just stuck to that.
Okay. So it's lovely. It's so amazing having you here, Doreen. And one of the designers that I totally have loved and followed, obviously, since you're in my book. 10 years, it must have been 10 years ago.
I know, yeah, exactly.
And,
yeah. 10 years.
Amazing. And the fact that you're still here says a lot of things in this marketplace where it's so challenging. And what do you think has been some of the strengths that's kept your business going in such a testing location, volatile location, and a challenging industry?
I know. There's the challenge of the industry and there's the challenge of the destination, right? We're based on an island, and we all know that on islands things just work like 3 times slower than in a city.
Yeah.
And also the fact that being an island, there are manpower issues, like when it comes to people really being able to produce the quantities I want in the quality I want. And of course a lot of bureaucratic challenges that I guess like every second African designer would agree with me, that is manufacturing in Africa and living in Africa. But passion kept me going. And after like now soon over 10 years, I can say that I'm very confident when it comes to like how to ship, how to prepare all the documentation, who to see, where to go. And obviously that has also, with this comes the time where, that we're growing, because obviously we're able to absorb more work with confidence and not worried about like, can we produce or maybe we can't, etc.
Wow. So if you had the choice to do this in Asia, to do it in Africa, it's just a silly question. What would you choose? Because we know if you do in Asia, there's a costing, because Africa is not always cheaper, which most people think, I can get it cheaper in Africa. It's not. And then the same challenges, like you're saying, are there. So have you ever been tempted or been introduced to production in Bangladesh or India or China or Taiwan or somewhere? Or have you done some things out there?
Yes, I have sourced fabric.
Okay.
Yes, that came a time where it was time for me to change, like move on from African print. Maybe not completely, there was still some African print, but I needed solids, fabrics that, that move, and, that I don't have to worry that the cut falls right because they're not stiff. So, it tied up with the collection. So yes, then I did have access to Hong Kong. And then of course I also had access to Italy, where what I like about Italian how to say, not producers, but sourcing in Italy, is that you can literally sleep very deep. Like when the quality comes, you're fine with the fabrics. There are no surprises, and there isn't any, like, if there's a delay, they'll let you know in advance. But when it comes to manufacturing in Asia, I mean, I cannot absorb those volumes. And I mean, we've had several times situations, like once we manufactured for anthropology and we did it out of Africa. So I've never felt like, the reason of having to go to Asia because it's maybe cheaper. No, that it hasn't. And the thing is, like the consumer understands our story and they can absorb our pricing because we explain why it costs us maybe this much. And somehow it works. It's just worked. I mean, from day one, I said, this is us, this is what it is, and this is how it works, and this is the price.
You know what? I love the fact that you said, you did it for these major brands, or the customers that you'd met, you would tell that it would be all about the story. They'd understand because they understood the story. It is something that's very relevant, prevalent today in business, and why things like video, and why I'm doing all these videos now, are so key, because stories are what sells. I did put in on my Facebook page. In fact, I heard it by a business coach that facts tell, stories sell. And it really is. You can give people the figures, we did this and this day and blah, 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 blah. But once you tell them your story, like you're saying, even I'm more intrigued, and I've been a follower, and I'm more intrigued because I'm like, there's aspects of the story I didn't know, and that makes me respect you and what you've done over these years. So that's just amazing. I
mean, imagine you come across a major, US manufacturer with a big name, I can't mention it, and they make their 350 or maybe 1,500 orders out of from our designs, and then they call you the moment your collection arrives and say, look, we really need to increase the quantities, we want the same amount of pieces, we want 3,000 pieces, can you do them? And I'm thinking, can we do them? Can we bring them to India? Can we bring them to, and I'm saying, no, this has to remain in Africa, and it's made in Africa, and that's the concept, because that's what you marketed and that's what we agreed. Now, if you want this done again, we need to have human 6 to 8 weeks, because we don't work underground, we don't have child labor, and we're not willing to work at very unfavorable hours. We can go for overtime, but you just can't come and say, I want this. So obviously for someone else who's maybe you could call a bit more aggressive, it's very tempting. You could just pick up the phone, or they already have their producers, they were asking for permission, and I said no, and it was a lot of money. But then I said no, I didn't want, because I just thought like it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't. That is so interesting. And now I say to people, one of the big mistakes, because I call out around 5 different mistakes that people make when they want to start a fashion business in Africa. And one of the worst ones, well, first, like I mentioned about the one tailor by the roadside, expecting them to be able to scale the business. It's not going to scale if you want to be growing it to that kind of levels. With one tailor. It's just not going to happen, okay? And because the quality and consistencies are the main issues. But then there's also the aspect of mindset. This is one of the other mistakes, a mindset that, I did this in China, I'm just going to do the same thing in Africa. Why would you think the same? It's completely different setup. There's different challenges, there's different skill sets. Different locations, different cultures, different languages, different ways of doing business. That's why I say to people, like, you moved to Zanzibar. I mean, you're Tanzanian, but you moved to Zanzibar. And, you were able to meet the women, you were able to work with this group, and to be able to provide this opportunity and build with them. And think you've had your challenges. But this is why I do say to people that we have these trips, we take people to Kenya, to Ghana, we do other countries probably coming up soon. But when you come and you go to the countries, you meet people, you build those relationships. Because Africa is all about relationships, right? It's either WhatsApp or BB Messenger, or come over, come see me, and they want face to face. It's so important.
This is how Africa works. It's very people-oriented. It's very much, the society is intertwined. I mean, you have to, when I enter the workshop, when you speak to this, or when I used to speak to the Maasai women, you first sit down and talk about how you're feeling and how are the kids, if the backache is over. It's like 45 minutes, you haven't discussed about work.
And in particular cultures, you could be in Ethiopia, you have to have your coffee, you have to have your injera, and then you can get going. You're like, hey.
So it needs a lot of patience, patience culturally, patience even when it comes to manufacturing,
Yes.
patience also when it comes to challenges. I mean, we face the challenges, the typical challenges that I face is, for example, very high taxes. That's beyond control. The challenges I face are like inconsistent electricity,
Yes.
And yes, and then taxes are just suddenly raised. So even when you calculate your end price, you've got to put some percentage of, just in case one minister wakes up and says like, oh, they've just decided to to rise the how do you say, the basic payment, from 0 to, I don't know, like 30 or 40%. We shouldn't calculate that, and you've already sent out your lookbooks and your price sheets. And what do? You can't go back to people and say like,
all of that. Yeah, that's a major point, actually. That is a major point, things like that. And even, I know the one that people always ask me, and because I help people to start fashion businesses in Africa, they tend to ask me, oh, Jacqueline, about the shipping. Do I know cheaper shipping? I mean, I know different types of shipping companies, and we know that the ones like DHL are basically the best if you wanted to get there,
Exactly.
If you go to local post, it may take 3 times as long.
It may not even arrive.
If it arrives by local post. But that is another thing. There's some things that are just out of your control. You may have things stuck in customs because the customs in that country is just the way they are, or maybe you didn't fill out that form, and that's why maybe people can recommend some people can work with a freight forwarder or somebody if you really want to go deep and have things as best done at bestly. I sound like President Trump right now. Having things done as best as you can. Maybe that's the levels you're gonna have to go down. But the reality is patience. Which I'm learning all the time as well, working in Africa. Patience.
It's very hard to come with a European, or let's say just very Western mentality of getting things done and done and dusted and leaving. Then you're not Africa ready, Yes, but I don't want to discourage anyone. I must say, like, a lot has changed. I mean, I'm speaking from Tanzania and from an island. A lot has changed. For example, today I'm able to ship by using the local post office.
Okay.
It costs just below $1. It costs depending on the volume, but below $1 costs $13. And in 10 to 11 days, it does arrive.
That's amazing. That's
exactly
good.
That's the local post. And then we have, obviously, looking at companies such as DHL, they've seen that there's a potential in e-commerce in Africa with designers. So what they've done is they've also geared and facilitated competitive prices of instant shipping to around the world. So rather than paying like 120 to the United States, now they are offering me like $40 for shipping, which
that's a huge drop.
That's a huge drop, yes. So I must say, like, a lot has been made easier than maybe 10 years ago. And I'm glad I never gave up, because doing business in Africa has now become, or in Zanzibar has now become much more easier. Obviously, I would know who would give me, like all the certificates after 10 years, right? But then still, I mean, like, you have to see that Africa is a very young continent. So every time the new, president is coming in, if you notice the age is getting younger, this means that people are getting more dynamic,
Yes, noticed.
So this is kind of like the mindset has changed, and it's changing, and it's becoming much more dynamic. Therefore, in the days whereby certain pieces would just get lost, they just don't get lost because people are working, and it's a stronger workforce that wants things to move forward. So it's not easy, but then it's got way better. And I think with having Jacqueline, at some point I also wanted to join you to Ghana, because I love that country. I want to see,
Come.
So and maybe not for manufacturing, rather sourcing some baskets.
Come.
Be fun. So yes, I think countries like in West Africa in particular, and also like Kenya, they are very much geared for smaller production, like small to medium. That's not what you easily find in Tanzania. Tanzania has really large scale production, so it becomes very challenging for myself to find a factory that would produce like 300 pieces. Everyone just thinks like, no, they can't do 300 pieces. You say
Maybe,
300, 3,000, you know?
but Doreen, my lovely, maybe that's a market opportunity for you. If you can deal with that, maybe that's a market. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it there, but I don't need a response.
It has crossed my mind. It has crossed my mind, but I think like I'd really like to stay a designer. I would want to manufacture. So
that's a good response. You know your expertise and you know your limits, because it takes, it's a lot of work. Let me ask you about your sales channels then.
Yes.
Because you said you're getting these products out. Where's your main kind of customer base, and is it just, and are you selling it just through your online stores, or are you selling on like international websites? What's your sales channels like?
So my sales channel so far has always been out of Zanzibar, and Zanzibar is an export market. So whoever shops with us, it's almost like 99% is leaving the island. No, nothing is shopped nothing stays in Tanzania. So having a, touristic destination has been our main focus. But obviously there's been like, for years, the demand of like, how can I shop more, So hence, this is the reason why this February we are going to go online with our collection.
Awesome.
So our works. And then I have 2 international websites that we actually in talks about, selling our works as well. So you'll be able to access our works. Maybe not everything because that's in the boutique, but definitely the collections that we that we produce will be accessible online.
That sounds amazing. And you're showcasing at which shows generally? Because you do catwalk shows, even though that whole market is changing in general.
Yes,
kind of catwalk show as model, a lot of it is like streamed, but you still do them. What kind of shows are you doing?
I do, I thought of, I almost stopped showing because, most of the African shows are really great, but then, they're really, sometimes there are no sales thereafter.
Yeah.
So and they don't come cheap. So I had actually stopped for like 3 years. And then afterwards I thought like, no, I think I really need to go back, but at least minimum a show a year, but maximum 2. Okay. So that I can also financially be able to like, invest in like a online shop and also produce a collection of 16 to 24 pieces that is commercially available, because you can produce and make pictures, but then you must produce that and bring it onto the shop floor, Yes, so exactly. That is also, you need to invest in that. So at this point in time, I thought like 3 shows are too much. And in East Africa, so I go to the one in Johannesburg or Cape Town, and sometimes I get invited to exotic ones like Morocco and so on. So I join on those ones, yeah. So, but I find my sales channels is Zanzibar, online shops, and of course Instagram.
Oh, of course, that's a major one.
Yes.
So, just a couple more questions. Lessons learned by doing fashion business in Africa. Lessons that you've learned. Sorry, I've thrown that one at you.
Yes.
Time.
Okay, the lessons I have learned is that, as I said, maybe I mentioned before, that you need to be very patient. Yes. You need to understand the cultural background of wherever you're working. I find in cities it's easier, but the more you go rural, especially with artisanal work, that's where you have to be very careful. And of course, you have to, my lessons, you have to always watch what people like, especially with my market. It's like I am an African brand in Zanzibar on African waters, but then I'm exporting. You see what I mean? I'm not based in Dar es Salaam or Arusha or Accra. So this means that, it's a different type of clientele. So I had a situation where, African and having our color, I love yellow. Yellow is a wonderful color. So exactly, see? So in my collection, I learned one thing. never produce yellow unless it's lime. Otherwise, you're going to wear it yourself. There is no Norwegian, there is no Swedish person or Norwegian person or German person who will dress in yellow.
Yeah, don't design for yourself. Design for your customer.
Exactly. So
and
those
know
are
your customer.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the lessons. The last one I personally want to ask you is, there's so much things I can ask, but I'm going to get some extra questions. But some tips that you want to give. I know you could share some lessons, but for those who are in a point of inspired by you, love what you're doing, and they're thinking, I'm thinking about transitioning to start a fashion business in Africa. What tips or advice would you say? Would you give?
I think you need to really ensure that you're really passionate with what you're doing, just generally in whatever you're doing, right? And you really need to make sure that you stick to your DNA.
Yes.
Because when you repeat that consistently, like I have been in crowds in maybe a city and there's an event and no one knows I am a designer, but you just hear like, oh, that's the Doreen Mashika bag. Even without the label, people know. Not because I've repeated that bag, but there's a certain style, of mixture of fabrics that everyone already realizes it's your signature. So try to find that DNA, because that's really true to you. And then you can continue playing around, but then, don't go too far or get carried away and look like someone else, because, it gets very tricky. And especially when you're limited with your market, in the sense of like, it's not like you're a huge designer where you're in all the top online shops. So you've got to be very careful with who you are, and and making sure that you stay that way.
Yes.
For as long as possible. Of course you can change and so on. People have to feel that because you are unique.
They're buying into that, aren't they? They're buying into that. And again, this is within the training that I do on called Spark, or Fab Coaching Program. One of the things that within that training is helping you to kind of define the designer to define their brand voice and their brand story, because these are the things you're going to use to market your business. Is, like I say to people, I get messages all the time, which sometimes it frustrates me, and I'm asked, what shows do I do? I don't do fashion shows. African Fashion Guide is not about fashion shows. Ages. We're supporting the full supply chain of Africa's fashion textile industry. Supply chain. So, talk about manufacturing, we talk about sourcing, we talk about business developing that business, but don't do a fashion show.
Yeah.
Completely different business model. But, those who know, they'll come to me because they know Jacqueline's the one. If I want to find where things are in Africa, then Jacqueline's the one who's going to know. Yes. They're not coming to me about doing an Instagram page just for that, just a general fashion Instagram page or production in China. No. Sourcing. So your brand voice is so key. I'm gonna so thank you, Doreen. Thank you so much. It's been great so far. And DoreenMashika.com. So it will be around this video for those who want to check you out, and your Facebook and your Insta where they can shop as well. Or just get out to beautiful ZNZ and go get some Zanzibari pizza if they're still doing that. And sugarcane juice. That's remember my experience. And watch the boys jump off the sides.
That's what keeps me going, when the day is
the night market. Zanzibar is not cheap, but if you get the chance to go, you will not regret it. It is just stunningly beautiful, and I can see why people go there for their honeymoons and just as a getaway. And as well as
the ornaments, the ornaments of the doors.
So gosh, yes.
So this is how I design, because if I'm from Zanzibar, I want to make sure that whoever comes can feel the local, ornaments on our either garments or on our clothing, or something that is not looking high street like any other part of the world. So if
Yeah.
you go any part of the world, you can't get this. You can only get this in Zanzibar because this is a Zanzibar ornament, you know.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I love that. My gosh, that's such a cool idea. And this is what it's all about, because then that's the story. People be like, what is that thing on there? And you'll be explaining about, you know, about their history and why they were there and why they're on the doors and how there was a protection and all of these stuff. So I love it.
So after they come from their excursions, they walk into the boutique and, oh, here they come again, a Zanzibar door ornament, you know.
Exactly.
That's what makes us unique from maybe even within my, you know, other shops in Stone Town. And eventually it does speak about, you know, the destination I live in. So this is obviously a pillowcase, and it's typically kanga. Kanga is a material that always has sayings. It's different from the wax. This particular one doesn't. If you look carefully, the corners, I don't know if you can see this, but the corners of...
Put it back a little bit. Oh, I see, yes, the beads.
Yeah, so we embellish the shells, right?
Oh, okay.
Shells.
Yes.
Yes.
The cowrie, yeah.
There's so many ways of having this just plain, because it also looks nice without, but just adding a little glimpse of Zanzibar for someone to take back home.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things, as I say, you know, sticking to your DNA and, you know, my destination is so important.